This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Titer. My guest today is Angie Banicki. Angie is a high-profile entertainment publicist turned tarot card reader to the stars. She is highly sought after by brands such as InStyle, Dior, Jimmy Choo, and celebrities who wish to provide their guests with a memorable and fun event experience. She's been featured on E!, Business Insider, BuzzFeed, Cosmo, New York Magazine, Hollywood Reporter, and Gloria in Croatia, for which I interviewed you, Angie, many years ago, like 7 years ago or so, when I wrote a story about why Los Angeles is and always was such a hub of spirituality. That was our topic. I love that story. That was a beautiful, big story. And you gave me some amazing pictures of you with your cards. I remember that. So that's how we met, Angie.
I was just thinking, okay, because I was like, wait, how did we first meet? Okay, that makes sense.
I told MB, I'm writing this story. I need, people to interview. And MB, who is doing sound baths and Reiki, she sent me to you. And I'm so glad we got to meet each other in person. And since then, I've been a huge fan of your monthly newsletter. I really want to mention this one because I want all my listeners to subscribe. I'm not a big horoscopy person. Yours is the only one that I ever read or followed. And I love it. Every time I find it in my mailbox, it's like, it's Christmas. Thank you for that one. It's been an amazing support. It's been really a fantastic support throughout all these years and inspiration.
Thank you.
And we are celebrating something big today. And Angie just published her first tarot deck. And it's called
Explorer of the Soul, a deck for everyday magic. Yeah, I'm just coming off of it. I mean, last night we sort of did an impromptu launch party that we pulled together last night. And I woke up this morning like, oh, I'm just rolling with the flow of it. Like it's been exciting.
Angie, tell me about it. So you were a publicist in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. How did you make a switch?
So this was not a case of, we're in a time right now where so many of my clients are making the switch from like, I work for a company and now I'm coaching or I'm moving into health and wellness, right? That's sort of the trend. When this happened to me, it was not the trend. It wasn't something I sought out, right? It very much sought out me where, someone gave me cards. First I started sort of having dreams and, my house would like speak to me and things just out of the ordinary that I was like, this is happening and there's no way to explain it. And it's magical and a little scary and a lot. And it was like, it became this like fascination for me, like what is happening? Why am I feeling these things and having moments and high highs and low lows and trying to understand, I guess sort of this new tapping in. And someone gave me cards, like this Prada deck, my friend Holly, and I would play with it. And it just kept getting stronger and stronger where I was like, whoa, I can figure out information, like just by looking at these pictures, I can figure out. And then I got my own tarot deck, the Rider-Waite. And I was doing it for fun until it got to a point where I was like, wait, this is all I want to do. And people are asking if they can pay me for this. So I've got to make it. And I just was like, I didn't want to do my other job anymore. That's when, I was like, that job just doesn't fulfill me anymore. And I need to figure this out. And even if it means I couldn't even choose anything financially. I was like, even if I'm poor, this is what I have to do. And so I followed that. And it really I think because when you do find your purpose and you're like doing something and the first half of my life, I really was in my purpose there, like throwing events and having this, I love being able to bring joy to people. And I felt like that. And then this just felt like this next level. It's time to go deeper. and like, you need to follow this purpose. And, as they say, like life conspired, the universe conspired to help me on that path because it was clearly where I was supposed to head.
I absolutely know what you're talking about. That happened to me with my writing, because I have an MBA. I had a very nice career in marketing and management and strategic, planning and things like that. And then little by little and totally by accident, writing literally fell in my lap. I never thought in my life that I would. And that brought me so much joy, but also so much amazing feedback from outside that suddenly I realized this is the only thing I want to do in my life. And as you say, the moment I dared to say, exactly as you said, I don't even care how I'm going to pay my bills, but I'm doing this. Suddenly, the universe started rolling out a red carpet and things started opening up. And it was like, oh my God, it can be this easy, So
I love that. It can be that easy. And I feel like that's a reminder for all of us when things feel, even last night, I was in my head, like, but what next? Now we launch, but I was like, but what am I gonna? And it was like this like battle of the voice, my mind was like sitting here. And then I kept like hearing over here, like, it's all going to be okay. And we're going to show you the next step. Like, it really is when you can just trust that, like, my intention is very like clear here of my purpose. And so the rest will just be shown, will be revealed. And like you said, like and when it really starts going, the red carpet, it just feels like you're like, how is it this magical? Like, how is it this?
How is this possible? Every door I knock on just opens up and they're like, oh my God, we've been waiting for you. Come in. You want to publish a book? Yes. You want to start writing for our magazine? Yes, please do. You want an award, a grant? Like, here you go. Crazy.
Yeah.
Angie, tell me about, do you have, maybe you don't, but do you have like a craziest reading experience? Like, do you have an example of some crazy stuff that happens when you read or not?
God, I haven't been asked this or thought about it in a while. And I mean, I have a million because I just remember over COVID, I would come downstairs and tell my dad, and, my parents are very like, my dad's sort of like, I just love that you help people, but like, I don't understand, like
what you're doing and the cards.
And I would come home during COVID after readings and I just would tell my dad things. And I just remember he kept being like, this is insane. Like, write a book. He's like, how is this even? This is just what? Because the connections, and sometimes I've had so many readings where I like know so many secrets too, where I'm like reading someone, but like they don't know that I've read this, like where there's like weird love triangles and things where I'm like, there's God. Just like that. There's some of that too, which is just very, but then, I can't even, I mean, I'll tell you, there was a woman here yesterday or 2 days ago that I read, and she just was like, my son, you called every ounce of the, like, I think she had like a miscarriage. There was a whole story where she was like, you told me just wait a little bit longer, like don't force it. And then she tried to force it. And then there was something about how she was just like, the way it all lined up, having your voice there, reminding me of like, if it doesn't happen right away, it's going to be okay. I have a lot of stories like that with babies where I help, the cards will really show me where it's like, help guide them through this to trust in the process and allow what's happening. That's not really that crazy, but
it's beautiful. And you're a mom as well. We forgot to mention that you have a beautiful daughter.
Yes. Can I tell you, I'm like, I want the world to know this because I'm like, how do we do this more ourselves? Or how do we encourage our kids? Last night, I was like, she's so magical. So last night during the party, once the party started, she kept pulling me aside and being like, can you spell business for me? Or can you spell, she's 7. And so she was writing these things. And I just thought, she's a writer. She loves to journal. And I wasn't really, I was in host mode, right? Like I had all these people at our place. And all of a sudden, and I would pull everyone who came to the party, I was like letting them pull a card or two and I would give them like a little message. And all of a sudden Charlotte comes out and she has this cup and she took little pieces of paper and wrote little notes and tied them in a little scroll, like taped it up and put them in this cup. And she went around And I was like, or she had me pull one. And I was like, wait, you have to do this around the party. But she had written the messages, but it was insane. They were like beautiful, beautiful messages from God.
Oh,
And the
wow.
way that they lined up, like one of my friends, her said, make a business. And she was like, and it's a friend of mine who left her company. Like, we were like, oh my God. And then someone else got subpoenaed in like a court case. And it said, be careful of like mean people or something like it was like, cause we'd all been talking about the subpoena and we were like,
Wow.
oh, it was like, mine was like,
Yeah.
don't be mean to yourself. And I can't explain it, but I was like, oh my God, I'm
it
so hard on myself.
really
And of
touched
course,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah. And
Incredible.
I was like, these kids are so magical. And here I am sort of like, oh, I'm like, I'm busy at the party. And then I'm like, she's the greatest gift. We all were just like, Charlotte, you're the oracle.
Angie, tell me a little bit about the new deck.
So it's called The Explorer of Soul, a deck of everyday magic. And it really, some of the things that make it unique, you know, it has music. So anyone who gets a reading from me knows I channel through music. You get a playlist, like the songs sort of talk with us.
Which
so
you also put in your newsletter, I want to say. The one I'm such a fan of.
Yes. Oh, yes. So when I write the horoscopes too, I don't write horoscopes based on astrology. I sort of channel it and use the cards. But it's wild how I get screamed at, almost like, tell Gemini this, like tell. And I put the music in with that. So the deck has those songs, and it also sort of guides you to be like, you can make playlists where the music talks to you. You know, I do it every month where I make like a different playlist. And the designer, Casey Blaustein Greener, who I did it with, she's someone I've known for a long time. We worked with in PR, and now she does design, and she is so playful in her pictures and in the way that we wanted it to feel easy to look at the cards and understand, you know, and I wrote the book that goes with it, but we wanted the deck. Like last night, people were here, like who don't know anything about tarot or who haven't, and we're pulling cards and reading each other and being like, it was funny. One of the guys that walked in, I was pulling the two cards and he just started being like, oh, that's because you have a movie coming out and da-da-da. And we were all laughing because I was like, you're reading them. Like,
yeah, you're reading them. Yeah, that was the point.
We wanted the
accessible.
whole thing is like, all our channels. We all are sort of tapped into that. We all are tapping in more. We all have I just spend all day and night doing it all the time. So of course I've gotten good at it, but I really believe we all can like tap into that. And so we wanted this deck to feel fun. Like you can have it at a dinner party and be like, what's everyone getting? What might it mean? And let's talk about it. And I've watched that happen where I'm like, oh, right, this feels like my real purpose, where I'm helping to like hold the space of like helping others tap in.
I want one. I have to order one. Can we jump to your mom? What's your mom's name?
Andrea.
Tell me a little bit about her and her life.
So my mom, I will just say this because I've been noticing this, that as Charlotte gets a little older, my mom and Charlotte are the same sign. They're both Aries. And so there are so many parallels that I see between my daughter and my mom. My mom grew up there were 5 kids. She was the oldest girl. So she had an older brother, but she was the oldest girl. And all of her sisters always tell me that she basically helped raise them. Like she was sort of a mom figure. And you see that in her. And I guess I share that because I see it in Charlotte, where I'm always like, I'm not really a mom. Like I love being a mom, but it's not, I don't know. I just see them and I'm like, you're both like moms. Like I feel like this independent, like, oh, I got a child. I got the most magical child and I get to do this along with something else. And they are both these beautiful, nurturing.
Where did she grow up?
On the south side of Chicago. And she is a librarian, teacher. She and my dad both are in education. So, you know, we had the mom, and I will say, you know, thinking about coming on this podcast, like one of the things I was thinking about is like with my mom, I always was like, I'm going to be the working mom that like, I'm not going to be as involved as they were, you know, because in education, we had our summers with our parents, but then we had our time, you know, it was it fit. And she was part-time for a long time, so she could be there for us. And I always sort of questioned that. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going to be the working mom. Like, I'm going to, once Charlotte's like 3, I'm back to her. And I found myself like, it's like I keep, every time I'm like, oh, in a few more years, I've realized I'm like, oh, wait, I love being a mom. Like I love like Charlotte at the party, right? Like I was like,
being with
she's
Charlotte.
my sister, like with the party with me. I was like, we are celebrating her as much as we're celebrating me. And so I've just found myself like looking back so many times to see where I thought that I wanted those things, but I'm like, oh no, I really like being a mom too. And on the other side of that, my parents, all of my friends who see them, they're like, they were born to be grandparents in a way that they are just their relationship. My daughter's the only grandkid. Mm-hmm. My brothers, we don't know, maybe they'll have kids, but at this point, Charlotte's the only. And so she's had 7 years of like so much love. And they, oh my God, that's cute. Like, I had to go on like some work trips like last month, and she spent so much. They flew out with her and helped out. And they're just like 3 peas in a pod. They would send me these videos. And I was like, I'm so lucky to have a mom and dad. My dad is, but they are just so special with her in a way that I'm like, how do you even, like, how do you come up with some of the stuff they do with her? They open her up. Because listen, there's stuff with my mom where, yes, it was not always easy. I think with any mother, daughter, any child, any parent and our mother. And it's interesting you're doing this podcast now because I feel so many of my readings, even more specifically in the last few years, there's really been this like examination of how our mother affects where we are and what, and really being able to understand how we are now and looking at our mom. And I will say like, it's, I've gone through like this where there was a long time where I moved to California and I was just like, my parents are the best. And they are, but it was sort of like, I just was like, oh, as long as they're a little bit farther away, like they're the best. And then now where I think maybe more aware, I can see some of the things where I'm like, oh, I'm learning, what I don't want, what I do want, what I want to take, what I want to grow. But I will say what I love about my mom is like, I've pushed her, especially even after being a mom, or I've brought up uncomfortable things that's one of the things I saw with her. She didn't always articulate and I think this is a generational thing too. Like, a lot of my friends' moms, like, it's just sort of like, you didn't speak out about it. You were taught to not, you weren't allowed to use your voice and talk about things. And I really have pushed that to an uncomfortable, place. But my mom, even when sometimes she gets like mad or sort of shuts it out, the great thing is she's always come back around and she'll be like the next day, like, I thought about what you said and like here. And she really is like, trying to understand it more, even if like, and I'm not good about doing it, I may be good at helping someone in a reading, but when it's myself, I get triggered and I go crazy, and I'm like, I'm gonna like, but what's great is like, we've grown through it and we've like looked at a lot of that stuff. And so, that's good.
How many children does she have? I hear you and your brothers.
Yeah, I have 2 younger brothers.
Okay. What do you feel you've learned from her? We got already a little bit, but can you think of like the most important lessons or things you've learned from her?
Sure. I mean, this is like a weird way of saying the lesson, but so I said the voice, right, in terms of speaking up, but also in terms of using my voice to share. Like, I don't know how many times those newsletters, I go to write it and I'm like, I don't have like, I get so in my head, or I'm like, I don't want to share my voice, or I have nothing to share. And I see times where my parents held that back, like had sort of a position where they could use their voice. They were like leaders in the community. They could have, but my mom would be like, I don't want, like, my best example of it now, because maybe as a kid, I wasn't quite as aware of all of it, but more recently, she decided at retirement to go back and do the job she did at 16. And she went to work for the Chicago Cubs, like the baseball team, where she would go and like do like help with tickets or like sell, drinks. And so she went back to do that, and she went back, and it was the year they won the World Series, which they hadn't won for like ever, 4 years or so, whatever it was crazy. And she got the ring, and it was a whole thing. And my brother works in, at the Wall Street Journal. And he was like, wait, someone from NPR, I was talking about your story and they want to interview you because this is so inspiring. You went back
to a job from.
Yes. And because she loves it. Like she's not making any money,
just because she loves it.
Because she loves it. And she goes, I found someone else to do the interview for, and my brother was like, no, the story is you. And she wouldn't do it.
Oh.
And we were like, Mom, that helps people. Like
it helps people
not doing that. But she was like, I don't want it on me. She refused. And for me, that's been a thing because sometimes I have to, I'm in my pajamas right now for this interview because there's a little part of me that's like, I'm about to feel raw and share things. And like, I get a little bit nervous where I feel it sometimes. I'm like, it would be easier to just say no, or not put myself out there or not do things. And sometimes the only way I can do it is if I'm like, okay, we're going to help you feel cozy and you can do it from your bed and in your pajamas and it'll be okay to share and be vulnerable. But I have to push that. And I see it with Charlotte too. We don't, a lot of times if someone gets a camera out, we don't want our picture taken. Like there's just a lot of things where we're like, and I have to sort of push through the discomfort of that. And I really saw that. And that story with the Cubs was such a big, because I was like, there were so many times with my mom, we have so many family pictures that my mom's not in, that she would just be like, I'm taking the pictures or like it's fine, but it created this thing that then, I know she's not sad. She's not in some of those photos. Like there creates a conflict within, right? And so that's been a really huge one because I feel that, and I feel it in so many different ways, like even just being sometimes in a group of people and I'll get nervous of saying something and it's very subtle, but yet real. Right. And a lot of women I know, we talk about this, it is generous. Some of it is personal. And it's okay to acknowledge it. And it's like, it's weird because there are a lot of lessons like that where I'm like, I know it's not my mom's fault. I'm like, I feel it from my grandmother, from it is
thousands of years.
Yes. And so just trying to break that, right? Even me doing another big lesson is like when the tarot stuff happened to me, my parents were like, what is happening? We were at my brother's wedding in France and I had the cards and I was like, don't let my parents, all the French cousins were like, oh my God,
the card.
She has a gift. Tell us. Yeah. And I'd be like, don't let them see. And finally my parents were like, what is happening? And they were, they were just very deeply uncomfortable. They're very Catholic and didn't want to know about it. And they just were, it was like, I couldn't really talk about it. I had to sort of have this thing for a while. And then I'll never forget throwing a party at my house, having a bunch of friends over when my parents were in town. And I think I was just I'd been doing it for a little bit, like reading cards, as my job. And they came to me and they were like, oh my God, we have so many people came to tell us stories of how you helped them with the cards. Like someone was crying and saying you really helped them through a hard time. Like someone else had this story and they were like, this is a gift and you can't, and they were like, you can't not do this. It was such a shift where before they were like, oh God, what is she doing? How do we make it stop? Like, this is not good, to like, oh, you have to do this. But I had to push and I had to be in discomfort knowing my parents, it wasn't like I felt like, oh, they're disowning me or anything like that, but they were deeply uncomfortable and not able to express it even or explain it. And now they're just so proud of me, and couldn't, my mom was the first one when our website went up selling the cards to go buy a bunch of cards, to give to people. So it's the best, but it is like pushing through. And she knew, and that's where I feel like part of that gift too, she was like her grandmother. So my great grandmother that I never met, had cards and my aunts had to tell me, they were like, your
mom wouldn't tell you.
My mom never told me. The aunts told me. And they were like, she had tarot cards. And I was like, what? How has no one told me that? And they were like, but my mom had told me she would have dreams. We all were scared because her dreams always came true. So whenever she would say, I had a dream, we were all like, what is she about to tell us? And then my aunt said that she had the cards, but she started seeing so much negativity and started knowing so many things she didn't want to know that she threw them away. And what I had to take from that is like, I am up for the responsibility, but I also trust in the light. And I don't know how many times I've seen hard things for people, but helped guide them through it versus just being like, oh, this is happening. Instead, this is a challenge that you're coming through. And like, this is how you're going to like move through it, right? Which feels like a part, like the evolution of tarot.
Yeah. And do you have a third lesson? Or should we jump into what do you wish she had taught you?
Well, I was kind of combining all of those things.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. Let me think. Maybe let's come back to it. The other is, what do I wish you had taught me?
Yeah, something important you had to learn yourself. You know, something your mom didn't teach you or your parents, something important you learned by yourself that maybe you want to pass on to your daughter, you know, something. If you could tell new moms, I wish my mom taught me this, teach your daughter this.
Yeah. See, this for me has to do with like trusting intuition because Charlotte, just as I told you with her, and I see it with my mom now. She does it with Charlotte. Like I see the things where I'm like, I wish my mom would have done this with me. And now she's doing it with Char, where I'm like, oh, again, that's where I'm just like, she didn't know then. She didn't know. We didn't know then. It wasn't, or not, most parents didn't understand the magic of these children. Like Charlotte is such a vessel. And there have been so many moments where she has said things or taught me things where I'm like, that came through her. That was spirit speaking. That is a deep soul. She doesn't even know she's saying that, but I've allowed her and really trust and asked questions and let her like say more or explain more. And I think a big piece of that, so it doesn't mean like, I don't know, one of my friends here who was here yesterday was like, well, that's because your daughter's like yours, so she has this gift with the thing. And I was like, no, I really think kids, if we just listen, it's that simple. If we just really, if we hold space and we really listen and let them use, this kind of goes back to using their voice and like say, like you can hear, and even things that they bring up where like there was an argument that I was having with my partner and what Charlotte was saying to me the other day, just out of nowhere in a way that I was like, it's as if she heard our conversation and now she's reflecting back to me how to look at this in a different way. It was wild, but I had to deeply listen and connect dots, you know, but I was like, oh, she is so wise. But it's funny because with children, right? It's just in this like light, whimsical. They're not like, let me teach you a deep lesson. It can be so many, and even in their hardship, right? If we look at kids and watch what they're moving through in the hard moments, I don't know how many times I have to, and that's probably why I got the thing yesterday that said, don't be mean to yourself, because sometimes I watch when she's struggling and I'm like, this is part of my lesson too, that I haven't worked through and it's coming through her. I see the responsibility in that where I'm like, because once we can shift our own, like if we're holding on to emotions that we're not processing or we're ignoring or we're pushing down, it's going to come through in our kids. And so when you're like, what's wrong with my kid? This just happened. Well, no, this is part of like, there's something in you too, that you can like help move this or understand it. Right. And so it's even paying attention in those ways. I think that, but yeah, the bigger lesson from my mom is like, I don't think that, because again, as this started happening to me, where I started having the dreams, now my mom will call me. It's wild. We have had similar dreams about my brother, but she'll be like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. I had this dream and then this happened, you know, like, but she didn't talk like that. She didn't share those things before, but it's almost as if once I opened up, she finally is opening back up to that guidance, listening in a way that's been so cool to share together and see. And I feel so lucky that I get to be with it with Shar from the beginning.
From the beginning, support her from the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, Angie, this was very fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I want to just quickly recap. So as we learned to use your voice, but I also wrote down to share yourself with the world, that sometimes it's not fair to keep yourself away from the world, and to be open-minded to support others, even if it's foreign to you, to support your children. And then what you haven't learned is to trust intuition. And we just spoke about allowing your children space, recognizing this connectedness to whatever you want to call it, spirituality, God, universe, and allow space for that and support them in that. And you mentioned something, I think it didn't come really as a lesson, but I want to mention this as a lesson, to heal ourselves for the sake of our children, that you sometimes recognize things in your children that it's like, oh shit, I didn't deal with this, and now I see it in my child. So did I miss anything?
No, that's great. That's great.
And thank you again for your second interview with me. Let's see what comes in the future.
I know, I love this. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for being my guest. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.